Welcome to the Snob podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Snob podcast. I am your host, Mick Manhattan. Thank you so much for joining in. We're having a really fun time this week. We've been talking a lot about different movies that are going on the Discord. We're talking about it on Patreon. We're talking about it in a bunch of different places. And we're really getting involved, especially with what's going on this summer blockbuster. Blockbuster, says the least. Releases and kind of how bad the box office is doing. It's been a kind of a big conversation that's been going on between myself and a bunch of others, and we're going to get into it tonight. I brought Phil Better on from the Invest in Yourself podcast. Very talented guy, award-winning podcast. The guy knows podcasting, but I have a lot of questions in terms of what podcasting and YouTube and TikTok in this world that we have. How is this affecting maybe the box office? So we're going to be talking to him about that. I want to say again, thank you guys so much for joining in. I really appreciate you as always. Feel free to kind of chime in, talk about it in the comments, and I'll bring them up as we go. But yeah, this episode is brought to you guys by Entertainment Earth. If you haven't checked them out, it's a glorious wonderland for all collectors. They have tons of stuff, new and old, that you guys can go check out. I shop there myself. I get a lot of my Funko Pops and other collectibles there. It's absolutely awesome. If you guys want to check them out, you can get 10% off using our link or affiliate link down below in the description. Go check them. Let me know what you think. I love to hear what you guys think or what you get, and let's sound off, make sure to tag us in it. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. And if you spend over $59, you also get free shipping and an additional 10% off, but make sure to use that link. Thank you guys so much. Also, I want to take a little time before we get started in the show and talk about two new things we have coming up on our Patreon. If you guys are involved in our Patreon, we truly appreciate the support. As you know, we have Warp Factor Fiction, which is our Star Trek rewatch show. That is a Patreon exclusive. You get that the first month. You get that every month. Two new episodes will come out, but you get that ahead of everyone else because it's a podcast and a video series. So you get to see it for the first month, and then it will be available to everybody afterwards. We have two new things coming up. One is going to be another podcast, the Totally Tubular 80s and 90s Rewatch podcast. That's going to be coming out, and that's going to be the same effect as you see on our YouTube, on our Patreon now, like with Warp Factor Fiction. Get that for a month or two, and then that will be available as well. But you also get definitely different perks, different clips and things like that you may not see. That's only going to be Patreon exclusive. And we're also doing something new where we're doing Snobs Film School. And this is going to be lessons, tips, tricks. I've been working in the film industry for over 20 years. I've worked on almost 200 productions of all different varying sizes. I would love to, help out, help you guys network, help you guys get things together. And if you go on to our Patreon, it has everything spelled out in each tier, what you guys are going to get. We're going to be doing not just a video series, but we're also going to I'll have templates available for certain tiers. I will have one-on-one help, things like that, editing, putting pieces together throughout budgets, scheduling, the whole 9 yards. Just go check it out. Let me know what you think. You can always message me for more information on that, but that's what we have going on. All right. Now, all that stuff out of the way, let's get to the show because I want to bring on my buddy Phil very soon, but I want to take some of your comments and see what's going on here. What's going on, AJ? I saw your pictures this weekend. That's awesome. Glad you guys got to go to a game and check it out. The better method of podcasting. Looking forward to this convo. Thank you very much for joining in. I am too. Phil is a very smart guy. He knows a lot of stuff, and I can't wait to talk to him about this because it's something that's kind of been itching for a little while. Our effect. And I say our effect because I know full and well I am a podcaster. I'm a movie reviewer. So what sets me apart from what I'm about to say? And really nothing. And I involve myself in that as well. And I will bring up my points once Phil is on and we can kind of get into it. But I do have a lot of adverse type of reactions. Like I know what I love to do. I know what I love checking out, seeing, being a part of. But I also know that if I'm hurting this industry, we got to do something about that. We got to have checks and balances and everything. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. We're going to talk about it a bit, and it's just exciting, with being a movie lover and a lover of all things. Of course, you guys know I'm directly tied into the horror genre a lot. and things like that. But like, I love them all, from independent films. I mean, the stuff you've never seen or heard of, all the way up to the big blockbusters. And I hate to see movie theaters suffer, but there needs to be some changes. There needs to be some things going on. And I don't think that it's necessarily a movie theater thing. I hear a lot of people blaming the prices. I hear a lot of people blaming, this, that, or the other thing. And that's been the same argument for many, many, many years. Whereas now there's a whole different thing going on. There's a whole different take that's really going to kind of take us into a different direction of what I think is going on and why the past had a better idea of how to handle it. But we're so out of the norm of what we're used to that we are literally flooded with information constantly. So it's just been kind of it's been sitting in my head for a little while, and I can't wait to talk to him about it. Trevor's here. What's going on, Trevor, man? I got to get you on, brother, soon. Good to see you, man. Keep up the good work. I appreciate you. I miss our conversations. Trevor and I used to have some great conversations on the show back when we had the showcase. And it was just always he's insanely smart about music and movies. Lots of things, but music and movies, we had great conversations. So I'm looking forward to getting back on and doing that again. Dad pulls back these box office bad publicity stunts to lower profits. It's similar to how Reddit affected AMC and GameStop stocks. And again, yes, but I say it's more along the lines of, and think about that. And I think, AJ, you're on the right track of where I'm coming from with this is, whose fault is it? And I think we can all pinpoint whose fault it is. Bad marketing, bad marketing has just been abysmal lately. Bad storytelling. It's just the visual effects are starting to slow, and we see what's happening. They're not paying their people. There's a lot more to it, but we're going to get into it. All right, James is here. What's up, James? Thanks for joining in, man. I appreciate you. It's going to be a good conversation tonight. I hope you guys can join in. Let us know what you think along the way. But yeah, ultimately, when it comes down to it, though, we think about the box office, and we kind of always relied on it. 2020 really threw us for a big loop. Shutting everything down. Nobody knew what to expect. Movie theaters were closing left and right. And that was a sad state of affairs. And one of the big things I was pushing for when they opened back up was we need to make the movie-going experience more of an event. And what I mean by that is back in the day, you always had a flood of movies. There was always enough coming out. They had the big movies, the little movies, everything in between. And you could play this stuff in the theater, but you could also make going to the theater itself quite the experience. We don't do that anymore. The only ones I could really say that still do it are drive-in movies, because they understand. They understand the assignment, and we're still letting them down. Mind you, anybody who goes to movies, if you have a drive-in theater and you don't go at least a few times a year, you're letting that business down. If you're a movie fan, you should be going. I stand by that. And that's a personal opinion, but I stand by that. You're a movie fan, we should be supporting. I'm not saying you have to go see everything. I'm not saying you have to break the bank, but we should go and support, and, kind of going back and forth with what's happening here and what's happening in this year in the box office is there are no events, but we're getting a flood of like these movies that are just not living up to the hype that we're setting them up for ourselves. And we're going to talk about that tonight too in Snobs Movie Summer School. We're going to talk about franchise fatigue. But I've been going on long enough. James also says, I think the biggest factors are the theater prices, the movie budgets, and the movie's quality. Those are big factors. The theater prices, I would probably knock down on that list as to the biggest culprits. We come to this place for magic. Okay, Nicole Kidman. I'm just kidding with you. But all right, let's bring on my good buddy. Phil Better is here. What's going on, Phil? Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Mick. I'm so excited to talk to you about everything movies and how podcasts affect the movie industry. I'm a huge cinephile myself. My first podcast was a movie podcast. and then went on hiatus when the pandemic hit, or the 2020 hit. And I'm planning on bringing it back. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this. When you messaged me asking if I could be on to talk about this, I was like, yes, just tell me when, because this is a topic that I have a lot of thoughts about. As someone who isn't in the movie podcast scene anymore, but is now reverted back to a fan, if you will. But because I'm in the business world, I'm looking at it at a different angle. And yeah, I have some topics. Hi, everyone. I'm Phil.
Phil, before we get started, though, let's talk about it. Tell us about your show. Tell us what you do and where everybody can find you.
All right. So who I am, I'm Phil Better, the podcast mogul. I have a couple shows a couple podcasts that I host. The main two is called Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast, and Invest in Yourself, the podcast series. Both of those are interview-based podcasts where I interview entrepreneurs and podcasters about their business or about their show, so that one, it can help others, either entrepreneurs or podcasters, take their podcast or their business to the next level. And you can find me on all social media. Just search up Podcast Mogul, Phil Better, or just Podcast Mogul, or Invest in Yourself, the digital investinyourselfpod.com is the website. That's pretty much all the promotion I'm going to do. I want to talk about this and everything we can do about the movies and podcasts and stuff like that. So let's start it, Mick.
Well,
hit me with your hot take.
All right, my hot take is there's too many cooks in the kitchen. My biggest issue is that there's too many movie podcasts, not just podcasts, but movie reviewers, YouTube videos, things like that. Too many people writing for publications and able to make their own publications, that we're getting so lost in the weeds of true integrity-driven movie reviews.
Okay.
And when you take that out, when you take that element away from, like, think about movie critics when we were young, when we were kids. You could probably name 10 or 11 straight up.
I can name two. Siskel and Ebert are the only two that I really knew when I was growing up.
You didn't know like Leonard Maltin, Gene Shalit, all of these guys. Like, but Leonard
Maltin, yes, because of E.T., because he was always on E.T. But you have to remember, I have Canadian versus American, so we don't have a huge influx in our entertainment industry. So the movie reviewers we would get would be American. So Siskel and Ebert, and Siskel and the guy after
Roper,
Ebert,
yeah.
Roper, Siskel, Roper, Ebert, and Maltin or Leonard were the only ones that we really got access to. Well, I really got access to here in where I'm from. I don't know about the rest of Canada. I'm speaking specifically where I am in the province of Quebec. We only got a limited number of reviewers, or we would read it in the newspaper. We didn't really have television or radio reviews. And I always found them stuck up, particularly when it came to maybe like not independent movies. When it came to the blockbusters of the time, like the 90 blockbusters, the action movies where you had Stallone, Arnold, pretty much those types of movies where you just turn off your brain and you're just like, this is good.
Oh, yeah.
And they were never a fan of those movies because obviously they weren't the fan of those movies. Those were targeted towards teenagers and young adults.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at those movies that were made as art, they were perfect for it because they were those were the movies that they enjoyed looking at. Yes, they went after some of the big blockbusters and the pop culture ones, but they were looking at it more as an art form than an entertainment form. And I think right now we've lost the reviewers who are looking at art, and everyone is just looking at the entertainment. And that's what Hollywood is like. Oh, they just want entertainment. They don't want art, which is a problem because there's a lot of good entertainment movies that are art. Like there's a lot of art movies that are entertaining, but they're not getting the spotlight like they used to because you don't have the smaller production houses and distributors now. We're down to like 4 major studios that make most of the movies, and there's some little subsidiaries which, half the movies we don't get any marketing for. But I think the biggest issue in the movie industry is we don't have seasons anymore. Like, I remember when I was a kid, Blockbuster was summer. Like from May to September usually was the Blockbuster, right? The shittier ones would be at the end or at the beginning, and the good meaty chunks would be June, July, and August. Those were your entertainment blockbusters, and you would get those big movies. You wouldn't have, like, every week there wouldn't be a big movie coming out. You would have, like, first week, maybe the third week of each month, you would get these bigger blockbuster movies. And then on the off weeks, you would get, like, some of the smaller artsy films or family films. So they weren't like, it wasn't a forced choice. Like, when I go to the movies nowadays, I look and I'm like, there's at least 14 movies I want to see. And going to what James said in the comments, it's the theater prices. Like, everything's more expensive nowadays. Inflation is screwing us, screwing the nations. But, like, I remember my dad used to be able to take our family, a family of 5, and it was like less than $100. Yeah. That's like tickets, treats, and maybe a couple of arcade games. Less than $100. Nowadays, you're lucky if it just costs you $100 to step into the cinema, because a family of 5, tickets are like $20 a pop. So right there, $100, boom. You haven't even gotten snacks, haven't had any fun, or you just go to like the local dollar store and steal some candies, and you're like, okay, no popcorn this time, but we got candies, for the kids. And I just think it's because suits are in charge in Hollywood. That's my biggest thing. Like, yes, we have too many entertainment-based podcasters reviewing movies, reviewing the latest movie, whereas they could go back. We have a history of movies. We have at least over 100 years of movies that people can go back and just go decade by decade, or even year by year. Because, like, moving towards the 90s, we're getting, like, every year you're getting at least hundreds of movies being released that people may have forgotten, may have not seen, because they're like, well, I have to choose between, Punisher and, Titanic. I know Punisher and Titanic didn't come out at the same time, but, you have these 2 big movies that came out, and you had to make the decision to go see it because limited money. So I think a lot of podcasters need to, instead of trying to be on the most recent train and talk about the most recent movie coming out, go back and review some of those old classic movies with, like, the new age, like with wisdom of age, like, go back, watch Gangsters with Angels with Dirty Faces, James Cagney, amazing classical thing. Like, go back, do a whole history of, the gangster films. Review those gangster films from the early 50s, the 60s. Show how they've transformed, until today, up till like Carlito's Way with Pacino. All these movies are ripe, and there's at least 2 generations that may have not been able to watch these. Like, obviously, I know, Mick, you've watched some classic movies because you're a cinephile, and there's a lot of cinephiles who have watched these movies and these classic movies and know about them. But there's at least one generation that don't know about these classic movies. And I think that's where podcasters should look. Stop trying to get the big, try and get those viral hits out there, because that's not going to work. You got to niche down, find the podcast or the style of movie that you enjoy. I know, like, we have our friend Sir Sturdy, who does the horror movies, and he does all ranges of horror movies, old, new, niche. And I love that, because I know I've introduced his podcast to so many of my friends that are in the horror world, and they're like, this is what I want. Like, this is their introduction to podcasting. They're like, hey, let's talk. Here's a horror movie. You love horror movies. Check out my boy's review on it. And, like, he does some modern day ones, like, ones they're coming out in the theater, but because it's not a blockbuster, like, for us, Mick, we love those action movies. There's so many blockbuster action movies versus the horror movies. Their big time is like October time. That's when he gets the busiest with horror movies. But there's horror movies kind of getting released throughout the year, And so, like, he has his opportunity, like, once a month, he can do this fresh new horror movie that's coming out, can do a review on a trailer or anything like that of new horror movies. But too many podcasters are going for the pop culture, straight new release, because they think that's how they're going to get the virality. And as you know, been in this game just as long as I have. Actually, I think you've been longer. To stay in this game, you need to have a set standard. You can't go after virality because you'll just burn out. You need to look at what do you love and what you want to share your love. And that's what I think. I know I went on for like a good 20 minutes.
No, I love what you're saying. So like there's no arguments here on that. And I agree with you. I think, listen, I don't pin it all on everybody who's out there, and it's not a bitterness thing because I receive things too, like I've signed up and received things too. And my biggest thing is I think we need to stop the marketing it's like weird TikTok trends since 2020 where the studios are pumping so much money into influencers and into podcasters and into just, and not even money into them. They're not paying them.
Oh yeah, no, they're
just giving them things, and and I get it, and it's great, but I think there's just too many voices now. And now, what you were saying earlier about all of the Siskel and Eberts, the Maltons, everybody, these are the guys that literally were writing the books on all of those things. Mm-hmm. They were the guys who took it. Yeah, they may not have liked it on their show. They could get a little controversial things they were talking about, certain movies they were talking about, and a lot of fans like us didn't love what they were saying. But at the same time, there was almost like a respect there because it was like, okay, you are talking about it in the art form, and you're doing it, and you're giving us, you're shining a light on these movies, good or bad, but saying like, here's the merit of them. Here's what like, let's talk about the lighting. Let's talk about all the effects that go into making this movie. We don't get that really. Now it's more like, let's be comical. Let's talk about all the funny things in it. Let's say, and I understand you're trying to find your footing. And I love what you said about start thinking outside the box, because we've been talking about that for a while here and wanting to revisit old movies from a more straight and narrow sort of sense. Like, let's talk about why this movie is so great, and go back to like a Angel Dirty Faces or a White Heat or something like that. Or even go back to like, Bringing Up Baby, stuff like that from the 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s and things. And discuss those because nobody is discussing those. I can spit and hit 20 YouTube videos right now that are talking about the Scream movies. They're talking about Chopping Mall. They're talking about something along those lines. But really, we're not getting any of these classic, deep-driven movies. You could tell people, like some of these reviewers, hey, have you ever seen Midnight Cowboy, and realize how it changed the face of filmmaking in the 60s going into the 70s, and they won't even know what Midnight Cowboy is. And I think that's, or if they've heard of it, they'll pretend to know that they pretend they've seen it.
Like, I've heard of this movie. I haven't seen Midnight Cowboy.
That's okay.
I know how classic it is. I know its importance in the cinema history. Like, that's I know there are movies that are like iconic that you need to watch because they set the standard of, or they've changed the face of movies, which is super, super. Yeah, I have to agree with Dad Pool on YouTube. What he just said, Stigma, if it doesn't make $1 billion, it's a flop.
I know, yeah.
I want to see less big budget movies. Like, I want to see like $100,000 budget movie again. Yeah. Like, we know those can make movies. If we just look at Paranormal Activity, the first one had like maybe $100,000, maybe $200,000 budget, and it grossed $1 million. Like, that's an impressive movie. Like that, I want to see more movies like that. I want to see, and I think we're coming to the end of this big blockbuster bit. I think with YouTube now being able to you can put like some of the YouTube movies that I see remind me of like the old Spielbergs, because these people, they had, like, luckily the technology is so cheap. Like, you get DaVinci Resolve, which is like a high grade, like what most studios use for editing and color grading, right? And it's free. And then they're making these movies that are like Spielberg, like with low, like I want Spielberg to go back to when he's on a shoestring budget. Like Jaws, I think is like, it was a, like what, how much was Jaws like to make in?
I would
like,
probably maybe a few million.
Really? I feel like, we have a computer. We can search this. We have the power. We have the technology. This is how the Phil Better Show was, my first podcast.
$9 million.
$9 million. Like, think about it. A $9 million movie.
Oh.
And it terrorized people. And you barely saw the shark. Like, the shark didn't work most of the film.
Yeah.
And the biggest action sequence was at the end. But it had a story. It had everything going for it. And Spielberg needed to work on these shoestring budgets. I think the biggest problem is we're giving too big of a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And we're expecting the world.
Yeah.
And like, I have a friend that works in special effects. One of her, the company she works, she does special effects for movies. And she's always like, she doesn't tell me who they're working on until after it's been like released or something like that. But some of the movies that she tells, like, they have to bid on the right to do special effects. So we have 300 special effects shots. Do you want it? How much is it going to cost? And then you find out some of these shots are super, super intricate and take so much time and effort to do. And other shots are just like, okay, you have to add nails to this two-frame shot so that it stays continuing, like. And those are like that next 20 seconds. Like, okay, that's super easy to do versus, okay, I need you to take out the wiring, take out the guy in green. I need you to put an alien over here all in one shot. And you're like, Jesus, this is time consuming, but I have a week to do it. And like, that's why you're getting like these horrible CGI in it versus CGI is supposed to accentuate what's already there. Like, I love when it goes, yeah, we use CGI, but we're using it to accentuate. So like, a monster is there in practical and you want to just add the slime dropping effect. That's great. Like, you have a practical monster like in the old days and the CGI just helped build it up. Now we're getting like full CGI monsters with no practical. And it's like,
yeah, and it just doesn't work.
No, like if it's for one shot, yeah, it's going to be great. Like you can put your full CGI budget into this one shot, or else you're going to end up like Wonder Woman. The last battle is just smoke and mirrors, and you have like no idea what's going on, and it just sucks. And I think that's the biggest issue. Like it's not artists in charge of studios anymore. It's lawyers and money men that are in charge, and that's what's ruining the game. Personally, for me, they're more concerned with profit off the movie than actually making a movie that's, going to grip the audience.
I mean, and that's funny that you kind of mentioned that, because I even then, like even back in the day, like there really was never artists in charge. It was just that when the studios were making their money, they let the artists be in charge. Like, because it was like, just, all right, this is what we want, go and do it. Or if you were a prominent enough director, go do whatever you want. We know you're going to make money. And it was like it worked for a long time. And then the 70s sort of broke out. And then like you got the blockbusters and Jaws and Star Wars and everything. And now it's like, oh, we want more money. Yeah. And none of that money seems to go up in paying writers or special effects or anybody else. So yeah, definitely it hits hard. But we got to a point today, and we were talking about franchises and such, that we're so at a point where that's where we're throwing all of our money. These studios, it's like, this is what we want our money on. That, yeah, independent, like you were talking about the $100,000 movies that are making 5, 10, 15 million. That's horror right now. Horror's doing that. And they've always been the ones to kind of be counterculturalists and go out. And I think one of my biggest problems is, again, it comes down to when you have movie reviewers were always, for me, and not just for me, but like in life, like there was a point where probably the most famous person on the planet was whoever was heavyweight champion in boxing. And everyone knew who it was for a long time, who the champ was. I would say that your local or even like a national movie film reviewer, somebody who wrote in the spotlight section of your newspaper, stuff like that, who was your entertainment writer, is very similar. Like you just kind of knew who you liked, even if you didn't know their name. You knew who you gravitated towards, what books you were going to buy, what newspaper reviews you were going to read because you liked those. When it came out on Fridays or whatever. Today, I can't read one single, and it never fails. I always find it because the lifeline of an editor doesn't exist anymore in this weird journalistic world that we live in. But I can't find one article on any internet publication now that does not have a misspelling, missing words, sentences unformulated in the proper way. It's anyone has a voice, so they will voice it, but nobody's saying anything of value. And I think it's hurting these movies to have this many voices before they come out. Now, I'm not saying shut everybody down and not allowed to be movie reviewers. I'm saying we need to stop, unless you are a certain prevalent number, of followers, things like that. I think it should be pulled back. I think screeners should be, and I'm including myself in this, screeners should be pulled back, things like that, because we keep giving these voices before the movies come out, and you're going to get a lot of ones who are jaded and are just going to say they don't like it, or it's wokeism, or it's whatever. You know how it is.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have others who are jumping in and getting stuff or getting a screener, and they're so excited they're going to love no matter what's coming out, and you're getting no real true value or opinion, just from my stance.
I have to agree with you. There is this kind of bias because, like, if I'm going to be reviewing movies, I want to stay on the good side of the studio so that they keep sending me those screeners so I can keep getting those rights to review. But on the flip side, us as an audience, we're not getting unbiased because now the reviewer is biased. Like the old days, it was like the new legacy media. Like we're moving into new, like we have legacy media, which is the old guys, the ABCs, the NBCs, the CBCs, the old school type of television or analog, if you will, content. And we're moving into a digital space where it's deregulated. There's no regulation. No one's doing journalistic integrity. It has to change. Obviously, it needs to change. We need to bring up our journalistic integrity. We need to reinvest in local news so that like local newspapers or local news sites can then hire different type of reviewers. Okay, we got our horror reviewer over here. You're going to just review horror movies. You can do the latest horror movies, the old horrors, boom. We got our action person over here. We got our sci-fi, whatever. And whenever it's like a horror sci-fi that mix, they can both do a review on it. And I think that's where we're going to be probably moving more towards more of a web-based news center where there is still integrity. We need that integrity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to be done. I don't think we're bringing up people's integrity. Like because everyone's so just like, I'm scared about hurting someone's feelings. I have to say it in a certain way or else I'm going to get all this negative hate. It's my opinion. Like I can tell you, I love the Star Wars movies, all of them. All the ones people hate, the Christmas special. I can admit the Christmas special has its issues. Yeah. But it's not directed towards me. I'm not its core audience. I realize that. So when I go watch it, I can't watch it with my critical eyes. I have to look at it okay, who is this movie for? This movie's for kids, to have them entertained. Cool. I'm going to make sure I bring a child with me to watch it because then I can watch it through a child's eyes. I'm not going to watch it through a 37-year-old man's eyes because that's not who it's targeted for. Just like the prequel trilogy was not the same target for the original trilogy. And the sequel trilogy was not the same for the prequel or the original trilogy. It's for a new generation. And I think we need to bring in more integrity. We need to understand that the whole system needs to be redone, obviously.
Yeah, I agree.
I think like with the streaming services coming, I think we can switch it to art houses going back into the movies, like art house films, like Oppenheimer. That's an art film. Like Nolan is an art house director. Like you can give him any budget and he's going to make a beautiful film. Like it'd be here $300 and he'll probably make a blockbuster out of that. But I feel like blockbuster movies should come back. It should be during the summer, you know, Christmas movies, holiday films like we used to have. And then the rest of the year, just have us give us art. Give us back those art movies. And because you have the streaming services, you can throw big blockbusters on streaming. You own the direction, right? Like Disney can make a film, put it on streaming, and still make $1 billion. Like this is Disney. Same with HBO. Same with Sony or whatever studios. If they want, they can make a deal with the distribution of films that they're like, you know what? It doesn't fit any of the blockbusters. Let's put it onto a streaming service. Let's go to Netflix. Let's go to Crave or whatever one you have, and you can release the film there. And that way, you know, we can have all these movies being released. Like there's some movies on YouTube. I see trailers on YouTube, and I'm like, wait, this movie's coming out? Like I never even knew about it. And like that's what you're marketing. You don't need to pay a huge marketing budget thanks to the internet. Like you can market for cheap. Like ads on Facebook, like $3 a pop, $5 a pop, and you can get massive returns on it, you know? You can put your movie on YouTube, so you're first of all, you're saving distribution cost. You don't have to pay movie theaters anymore. And YouTube will pay you.
It's true.
You know, like YouTube pays you to put your content out there. So why not use it? I now look at streaming like old school analog television. YouTube is PBS, if you think about it, because its content is created by the public. You have Amazon, you have Prime, that can be anyone. It can be CNN, it could be any one of the ABC networks, CBC, NBC, CBS. You know, those are boom. There we go. Boom. We have the streaming services that can be the main channels, and now they can put TV shows, and it goes into the releasing of binge-worthy shows, right? Old school shows can be binged. New shows, release it weekly. I don't need it binged one day. I want to release it.
Yeah, I get that.
You know, like what Marvel's doing with their shows. You know, they release 2 episodes, get you hooked, and then weekly afterwards. I think that's where we're headed. Right now, we're in this like gray zone. There's a shift happening, the old school moving into the digital and all this. And I think we just need to return to simpler times. Stop thinking like it's all about money. Because that's what it's all of the shareholders. I'm sorry, fuck the shareholders. It's the fans. Like without the fans, the shareholders mean nothing. Like,
yeah, you're not making them happy, and it's going to definitely, and we see it happening more and more. It's just you are disrupting how the fans are feeling, and it's not. I'm not just talking about fans of like Marvel or fans of DC or fans of Indiana Jones, right? Those are too niche. I'm talking about true movie fans who are going to come out and enjoy the movie in the movie theater. You know, I like the next few weeks, like we've been talking about this a lot. Like to AJ's point, Indiana Jones, we don't know if it's a flop yet because it has grossed $252 million on a $300 million budget. And it's only been in theaters for 2 weeks. So let it go the third week. If it gets its budget back, it's not a flop. Granted, it didn't make you the type of money Marvel's making, but yeah, we do need to stop forcing flops if it doesn't make its money back the first weekend. It's not supposed to.
No, it's like most movies usually used to make half the budget opening weekend. And it used to be like, 25 weeks or something? It would be like at least 2 months in the theater. And by the end of it, it would make its money. No. But having worked in a movie theater when I was younger, I learned something about ticket sales and all that. The first 3 weeks or the first month, movies in theater, the theater makes zero money off the tickets. No. It all goes to the studio. They make their money off concessions. And then afterwards, that's when they make their money off the ticket sales. It's after a certain number of weeks, they start making their money. But studios still have the chance to pull the movie out of theaters. So
they do that more and more now with streaming.
Because they have the streaming. But if you think about it, stop putting, like, if they didn't put these big blockbuster movies in to theaters, right? You start putting lower costing movies, right? You know, your $1 million movie, your $2 million movie, you know those movies are going to make money because you see it being made. You see other movies that are a smaller budget making big dollars in the blockbuster, making blockbuster percentages, if you will. Maybe not dollars, but in percentage, they're making those blockbuster percentages because they're making 120% back their budget or whatever it is. That's what needs to happen. I think there needs to be a shift of thinking, okay, let's go back to like the early 90s and aughts and maybe even the 80s where we had a blockbuster a month and the studios get together and talk about it. Let's look at how we can make it so everybody is making money. Like, stop looking at it. We're at a point where there's 4 to 5 big distributors. They can come together and go, okay, let's look at how we can do it so that everyone in the industry is making money and we're not making our fans tired. How can we work together? And I personally think
that'll never happen.
I know that the only time that will happen is during writer negotiations or SAG negotiations or the DGA negotiations. That's the only time they'll come together because it's always competition instead of collaboration raises all ships. Like, if they can come together and decide, okay, our blockbuster like, even if they decide our blockbuster season, this is when we're allowed to release our, you know, $100 million movies, let's just say, is from, you know, May until end of August. Boom. After that, it's Artist City. You know, the rest of the year, it's Artist City. Like, just doing that, I think, will save them money and will save the industry.
Oh, yeah. And to your point, too, with that, you know, if it was more widely dispersed to make other movies, because really, if you think about it, there are genres of movies that are missing from the big screen nowadays. Like, we just don't get them anymore. And I understand a lot of people said, well, I don't really go see comedies in theater. I don't really go see dramas in theater, stuff like that. It's a good point. You know, yes, I understand you don't. That's because we're not making them on the level where, like, Jim Carrey was putting butts in seats. And that's why he earned his $20 million. You know, so it's, you know, when you get to it now and all you see is blockbuster, it's too much, like too much epic at once. In like a month, it just tires you out. You don't want to go see it. And when you have this much in the forefront, and like, this is a whole different argument, but like all of the turmoil that's going on, like with the Ezra Miller case or the Jonathan Majors, or now it's Jonah Hill, you know, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, if you're looking for something that wasn't made by a monster, good luck. You know,
unfortunately, there's horrible people everywhere, and
so.
But it also comes. Sorry to cut you off, but it comes to a point where you have to differentiate between the art and the artist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if we look at bring up Kevin Spacey. Like, I'm not going to touch the most recent stuff with Miller and Majors, but if we look at Kevin Spacey, who has had such an amazingly long career and has some fantastic movies and acting. If we just look at Usual Suspects as one of them, like, that is a phenomenal acting job by him. You have 7. Now, if we look at it, are we allowed to watch those movies anymore because of what's come out about Kevin Spacey? It ruins those movies, because, like, I have friends who say, no, we can't watch that because of Kevin Spacey. And I'm like, but there's the ensemble.
Yeah.
There's everything that goes with it. And so, yeah, with the whole bunch of that's going on right now in Hollywood, trying to quote unquote clean it up. And that's why I think we have this shift going on in every industry. We're getting there, like the shift to a more simpler time, to healthier time, make it less problematic. But it's good. There's growing pains with that, and it's hard. I personally don't think they should have pushed so much The Flash as they did.
No,
but I understand why they needed to, because of the budget that it had. They needed to try and not take another L. And unfortunately, the head of Warner Brothers, whatever that conglomerate is now today, isn't the best.
No, And it is. And as we go on, like there's so many arguments to it, and like a lot of it really comes down to greed. And again, I know I came into this sort of feeling like I'm blaming podcasters and movie reviews, and I'm not. My feelings on it are, though, we do need to overhaul the integrity of film journalism versus film, critics, and have some oversight in the sense of like, hey, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get a job at a reputable newspaper or any type of reputable movie site when I look at all of your articles and there's misspellings and there's all this stuff. Like you're not doing a good job. You're not self-editing. When I write for any publication, I have my own personal editor I send it to, and for years have been doing all of my editing. And then when it comes down to it, I send it off, and my wife will read it, or somebody else will read it for me, and just be like, what do you think at this point? And then I send it to the person at the publication who I'm working for, and say, give it a read. Usually, I can tell they never read it because they come right back, looks great, and it's like you can put it up, but I know I've gone to 2 editors so far. I've double checked my work twice, and that's after me reading it over and over. So, and that's something that like nobody's going to do.
And that's integrity.
But I don't. Even if I never consider it integrity. I looked at it as I don't want to look like some asshole who's you're reading my stuff and it looks like I'm a 5th grader writing this.
Again, because you have integrity about what you do. You have integrity about the artwork that you're in. You're coming into this because you have a love of movies, but you also have, like you said, 20 years of experience in the industry. So you're mashing your passion and your love with what you do for a living and what you've done. And you're like, I want to make sure that what I'm serving to the people is quality, because you have that integrity. It's about quality because quality gets you the things. Nowadays, people are just looking for that, trying to put that hot take out there that's going to create controversy, that's going to create people coming to talk to them and get them to the place where they have the money. They get money, they get fame, they get infamous, if you will. I as a podcaster, I don't know how to speak or say words.
That's not true. He's tired.
Yeah, it's a little late, and it's hot. It's humid as hell here. So, but people aren't looking to bring integrity. They're just looking, hey, how can I make a quick buck? And it goes to greed, which really sucks because I don't want to blame greed on this, but it is. It's unfortunate that greed. It's all about greed because it's all about money. Money makes the world go round. Instead of looking at like, how can we make it better? How can I'm looking at this movie. Here are the positives. Here are the negatives. And again, the story's unfortunate because they're pushing out so much. They want to do so much. They have.
Did I lose you, pal?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Sorry.
Well, there you go. You're good.
Sorry if I cut
you
out.
got so impassioned, your camera's like, I can't keep up.
Yeah, it's like, hold up, Phil. Chill. You're heating up everything. I just feel that there's an inevitable change that needs to happen on a whole. Like it's a huge whole, not just in the podcasting, movie, or anywhere. It's just we need to bring integrity back, and I think we've lost integrity, accountability, because we live in the court of public opinion, and people just want either to make a splash because they believe any publicity is good publicity, and we have to go back. No, there's publicity that's not good. Like if you're just going to come out and say, well, it's just wokeism, like what are you adding? Like most of the journal, like I remember when I would watch Siskel and Ebert, they would add to it. They're like, look, this is the good points of the movie. Here are the things that I had an issue with, and this is how I could fix it. If you do something like that, you're gonna gain a lot more loyal followers than just saying, this is what's wrong with the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's what's wrong with the movie. That's your opinion. But those are things I love. Like my brother and father went to see the most recent indie. I'm probably going to wait till it comes out on Disney because I think The Last Crusade should have been the last indie movie because it was such a perfect send-off to this character. The Crystal Skull, we don't have to talk about it. It's a movie. It hits the bare minimum of what a movie is. It has characters. It has three sections, and there's a plot, and there's an ending and a beginning. It's a movie. Is it an indie movie? Technically, yes. Is it a movie worthy of the indie title? No. Simply because they were just trying to milk the movie. Because, again, artists aren't in charge in Hollywood anymore. They're suits. They're only concerned about money. Whereas when you had the golden age of movies, directors and producers like Lucas and Spielberg and Scorsese and which one? Not Kubrick and the one that did The Godfather. Coppola. They all were given like, okay, here's the source material. We trust you with what you're going to do because you're an artist. Because the suits knew the arts made the money, whereas the newer ones are like, no, it's because of us that the money gets made. So let's push out as much stuff out there as possible so that we can make as much money as possible. And they don't realize, like, if you just because you spend money on something doesn't necessarily going to make it a success.
Yeah.
Like we need our writers. The writers should be paid properly because they put the words in the mouth of the actors that talk about stuff.
Very true.
Just so everyone, I'm 100% clear on this, and everyone who's listening and viewing this is clear. I support the WGA, the ACTRA, the SAG, all unions across the board because they're making sure that the regular day folks are taken care of in private sectors. No. If it wasn't for the unions, the private sector workers would be fucking screwed. And I think the unions in Hollywood are getting a bad rap because, they're doing all the work, whereas the studio heads aren't doing anything. And the studio heads are getting paid so much more money than the writers. If it wasn't for the writers, the actors, the directors, the grips, we wouldn't have an entertainment division.
Sure. I listen, it's hard for me to disagree with you on that.
Sorry, I'm on a hot take today. This is a hot take week, I think.
No, I love it. I appreciate it. You bring some great value to these conversations, and I appreciate you, Phil, so much. It is time to say goodbye, my friends, because we're going to finish out the show. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking movies with me. I'd love to get you back on soon, talk about some other stuff going on, and really get into the nitty gritty some more.
I am always available for you, Mick. You are one of the truest companions I have in this podcasting space. So anytime I can help you out, anything I can do to help you out, I would love to. Please, my DMs are always open for you.
I really appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, everybody. Feel better. Go down in the links down below in the description. Check him out. Check out his show. Brings a lot of value to the things he knows, and he knows a lot. Thank you so much, Phil.
You're very welcome, Mick. Have a great day, and everybody, go see a movie. Just go see a good movie. Go watch an old movie and talk about it with your friends. But anyways, Mick, have great, and make sure you fix some of our fears, okay? I want to see the fix. I want to see the fix.
Let me know what you think. I can't wait to hear it.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Take care. Guys, so that was so much fun. Phil's a great guy, and you should check out his stuff. He's a lot of fun. And I saw some of your comments. We're going to go over everything before we get into Snobs Movie Summer School, where we talk about franchise fatigue, which kind of piggybacks off of what we're discussing right now. James says, when I do my CBL series, half the time I look at older movies in a franchise or something tangentially related to what's coming out. And yeah, we talked about that a little bit, especially when you gave Crystal Skull. And that's a smart move. And I get it. And you need to do those things because you're building your channel, you're building your network of what, and your reviews and such. So I definitely get it. And you should absolutely stick to that. But let's bring fresh perspectives too. Anything new, not anything new, but anything older. Like the one thing that he had mentioned about Horror Source 30 is that guy is watching movies I would never lay my eyes on. I would never think to put this on, but he's watching it, and it's at a spin of a wheel, and it makes for a fun review because it's something different. Now I can find out whether I want to watch it or not, as I'll just listen to them talk about it, and it's engaging. I think we've definitely been oversaturated with how many big event movies are coming out, and it no longer feels like an event. Yeah, absolutely. How is it an event if there's a different Marvel movie coming out like every other month? You know, it's just and it sounds like I'm attacking Marvel, but it is a franchise thing, and we're gonna get into that in just a little bit. James also says, I feel like even something is not targeted to a specific audience, I don't think that it negates from pointing out flaws. Very true. And I did see this as we were talking, but I didn't get a chance to bring it up because we're in the middle of a conversation. But you're absolutely right. Just because it's not targeted, and I do know what you mean. Like, we do have to think about the Star Wars movies. And I think what Phil was saying in this instance is, you know, like the Star Wars movies are not made for guys in their 40s, guys in their 30s. You know, they're made for kids to go and enjoy. And they've adapted thusly to that. That's why we see so many more kids shows that are targeted towards children, you know, to sell the toys, to do those things. My point, and I think Phil's point to this is, we have way too many movie reviewers who are considered top tier reviewers who are just saying Star Wars bad because it doesn't remind me of the feeling I had when I was a kid. And that is legit. There's too many people saying that. And you can't say that because, again, it isn't essentially meant for you. So, like, if I go and I watch The Little Mermaid, it's not my demographic. It's not, I'm not who they're going for. So if I'm going in there to review it, I'd better understand the eyes of which it's supposed to be beset upon and talk about it from an angle in that sense, but also talk about it from the, you know, yes, point out its flaws, but also point out the good things about it too, and come full around. That's having the integrity. Understanding that, listen, Paddington and Paddington 2 and all these different movies and stuff like that, they're not geared towards me. So when I'm reviewing them, I have to know, are these still movies that are good for kids to watch? Because this is who me as a reviewer, that's who they want, pointing it out to them. Like, you know, people who don't know or aren't into movies like I am, they don't know, so they don't want to be told what to do, but they want to have the advice of, like, yes, Elementals was great for kids. It's fun, and it's perfect for them to get, and for the whole family to go out. You're going to get a great story for adults, but the kids are going to get great visuals along with these great characters to match that story. Go and talk about it from that instance. Don't just say, hey, I'm a 41-year-old man, and Elementals I thought was really good, and you'll enjoy it too, because then you're only talking to other 41-year-old men. You got to talk about it from everybody. You have to have that know-how and that understanding. I'm not saying you don't particularly, but there are a lot of people who don't. Studios and theaters need to keep smaller movies in theaters longer. Several smaller movies I was interested in were gone after a week, and yet Avatar stayed in theaters for like 7 months. That's hard to argue at all with that. That AJ says, Deadpool says, so is AI going to hurt studios or help them? I know everyone is against people losing jobs, but AI doesn't eliminate human production completely. What's your guys' take? I think they're going to try and push for AI because it's cheaper for them, especially in the midst of all these, you know, what's going on with writers. And you're going to find very soon that it's going to hurt your wallet. And I hope you find out quick, because if you keep pushing it and it's hurting your wallet, especially like, you know, they're talking about Warner Brothers now picking all their movies through AI. It's the dumbest move you can make. You're not tapped into your audience, and that's going to be the problem. So, and then there's just that human element of tapping into your audience. Chicken, what's going on, man? How you doing? It has been a while. I hope you're doing well, my friend. All right, let's get to it. Tonight on Snobs Movie Summer School, talking franchise fatigue. Now, what does that mean? It's similar to everything that we talk about with the movies. It's all cyclical. Things are always going to come in and out. There were times where disaster movies for a small period of time, everybody loved them. Horror movies for a small period of time, like everybody loved them. They were all similar tone. A good thing is that a good example of this is, like, you know, Scream. When Scream came out, it was new, it was fresh, it was meta, it was different. In the 90s, like it was just something that popped, and it was such a huge hit. Now you have the I Know What You Did Last Summer. You have all these movies that follow suit that are similar about these WB type tweens running out, getting in trouble, and having a killer come after them. Nothing wrong with that. It's a formula. Formulas work. Right now, we are in the franchise formula, and I think the fatigue is there. It's tired. It really started, not to say that it didn't exist and we didn't have franchises always existing, but I'd say right after Dark Knight, even Batman Begins was a hit, but wasn't a huge hit. But it was the Dark Knight and then Iron Man that really sold that franchises are the way. They, even by that point, you had three versions of, or three movies in the Fast and Furious. So by 2008, you had three movies in the Fast and Furious franchise. And by 2023, only like 15 years later, we're going on 11. And that's not even counting all of the spinoffs and such. We have a lot of franchises that are pumped out constantly. And that is the big thing. And I think that's where that greed factor that we were talking about earlier in the show with, when it comes to studios and movie critics and such, it plays into this as well. Franchise fatigue is a real deal. And I really think that we are at a point where like people are just tired of the same now status quo. Yeah, I'm going to go see a Marvel movie. I'm going to go enjoy it. But more and more, it seems like people aren't, because they're just not holding up to what they were. And I think that goes with anything. I think you just need to cycle it out. I think there needed to be a break after Endgame. And I know that's kind of a tough thing to sell, because if you take a break, you miss out on actors getting older and not being able to do the roles and come back and revisit. But we had such a finality with that movie, and with like over 20 movies leading up to it, that I think it just was time for a little bit of a break. And we've got some things since then that we enjoyed, but we've certainly seen an influx of so much more and so much change. When you add change to your franchise, it hurts it in a lot of ways, because now people get even more tired. So when we get into it and we have, franchises that are just huge. So let's talk about the domestic. All right. I want to talk about domestic first, and then we're going to talk about worldwide. And I'm just doing the past 10 years. Okay. So actually, I'll go back to 2008, because that's where we're starting with the Dark Knight. Since 2008, in this domestic box office to 2023, we have seen every year the highest grossing movie has been a part of a franchise, except for two. And the first one was in 2010, and it was Avatar. Now, Avatar, of course, is its own franchise. We've seen what it's going to be built to. We see where it's going. So it's already become such a huge hit that it is a franchise. So you see where I'm going with that? So now there's that fatigue of like, all right, granted, there was a lot of years in between, but do we care? Like, the movie didn't do as well. It's not the number one movie this year at the box office. So Avatar 2 didn't hold up to what the first one was. So they're still going to make them. We're still going to have a franchise. But then this year, is 2023, is the other movie that wasn't a part of a movie franchise that was currently out. And that is the Super Mario Brothers, which, again, you can argue is its own huge franchise within itself, and already had a built-in audience when the movie was getting ready to come out. But it's the number one movie. And now if you go back and you look at the domestic and the total gross of everything, 2000, and so since 2020, it's been over $1 billion for every movie. And that has been 2020 Bad Boys for Life, which is part of franchise. That was the third one. $2 billion. Then you had Spider-Man No Way Home made $4 billion, 4.4. Then Top Gun Maverick made $7.3 billion. And now the Super Mario Brothers is sitting at $4.7 billion. 2008 was the last time we had that single digit billion, which was $9 billion, $9.6 billion, and it was the Dark Knight. Everything else has been $10 billion or above, and has all been franchises except for Avatar. which again has grown into a franchise. So it's sort of all of these things are still franchise capable. My biggest point to all of this is, how often do you look at a movie theater, look at a movie coming out in these franchises and what's happening and say to yourself, I need a break, or I'm done, or I'm not going to see that. I just can't push for it. This, that, the other thing. All too often, even worldwide, it's very similar. I don't think anything is different worldwide from, it isn't. Everything is the same. From 2008 to above, everything is the same on the worldwide that it is on the domestic. They just earned a little bit more. Well, not really. They earned pretty much the same. So my point is, with franchise fatigue, I think that's what's burning out the movie theater going experience right now. And I think the movie theaters need to demand more. When it really comes down to it, they need to demand, like, listen, you have so many of these other streaming movies that are doing really well, that are comedies, this, that, the other thing, musicals, stuff like that. We need to make more than just superhero movies. We need to make more than just fast movies. We need to make more than just this, that, or the other thing that we've seen time and time and time again. They may be great to sell your streaming services, but you are killing the movie theater. And I think we need to really spark some discussion on where we need to go with it, because horror movies aren't doing it, because horror movies are widely independent at this point that are doing really well. And the big budget horror movies just aren't sitting as well as they could be. And we're not putting enough into them for that. So it really just comes down to what do we want and where are we going? And I like what Phil had said earlier when we were talking on the show, that we need more mid-card movies. We need more movies coming out that are just separate and different. What happened to the romantic comedies? How do you expect us to bring, our significant others to the movies for a date night, and all there is just action movies across the board? You're exhausting us. And you're exhausting your bank accounts. I'll tell you that much. James says they do make more, just no one goes to see them, or they wait to see them at home. They're always going to make money. They're not making their money back. They're really not. Go look at the numbers. Go look at the marketing. These movies aren't making their money back. So we're seeing the downward spiral of what's happening in the movie industry and what we're putting our focus on. If we stop making $300 million movies at pop, which 20 years ago was an ungodly amount to even think about, to make a movie. If we stop making those and start making good movies that are well told, we're going to have a good time. I think the biggest indicators right now is what's going to happen in the next few weeks. I think Dead Reckoning is going to do really well, because that franchise has been coming out and it's been separated long enough each year, 4, 5, 6 years or so between each movie. And I think this one's going to spark. Plus, it's the end. He's ending it. So it's the part 1, 2, a 2-part ender. So I think that will do well. I think Barbie will do really well. I don't know that Oppenheimer is going to do well. Not that it's not going to be a great movie. Not that it's not going to be interesting to go and see. And I will be seeing it. But I just don't think that Oppenheimer is going to hold up to Barbie. Because right now, all we know is to go see these movies. Go see these big, flashy movies that make a ton of money. And I can tell you with surety, there's already spin-offs being planned for the Barbie movie. This is supposed to be a movie that was so outside the box. Like Greta Gerwig. Now look her up if you don't know who she is as a filmmaker. And Noah Baumbach, who wrote it. To say that they directed and wrote a Barbie movie is ridiculous unless you know their style of filmmaking. And that makes me want to see it more, because it's so out there and they have such a different perspective on things, that to see this big of a franchise type of movie be made by them is interesting to me. But we're not seeing that in too many other elements. They're not seeing that in too many. They're throwing directors that, sometimes you hear of, sometimes you don't hear of, or sometimes they're just stuck to this franchise because they're yes men. I want to see more of this. I want to see more indie filmmakers get bumped up to really try and tell a good story that's out of their element. So I think franchise fatigue is really what's hurting things right now. I think Indy would have done better, and a few other things would have done better. The Flash is like it's like an enigma all itself. But like a lot of these other movies, I could have seen doing better if there just wasn't each week some type of event. But it's not really an event; it's just boring at some points. It's just not hitting. Of course, we were going to go see The Last Guardians of the Galaxy, but look at Ant-Man. Ant-Man should have been on the same level, but for some reason, these things are getting too tired and too old, and they're just not working. So that's my feelings on franchise fatigue. Let me know what you guys think. Sound off. You can hit us up here, leave a message. If you're on the clip, which I cut later, you can please feel free to jump in. Let us know what you think. But let's get into it. Last segment for tonight. Oh, wait, James actually said something I want to, I think Barbie versus Oppenheimer box office battle has become so much of a meme that it will propel them both into a big box office numbers. When you have two movies like that, you're never going to have two big box office numbers, blockbuster numbers. One of them is going to fail. One of them now, maybe make its money over time, whatever else. It's just too fast that they're taking movies out. But I think Barbie is going to be the big winner that weekend because there's not enough people who want to see two movies during the summer in one day or one weekend. So we'll see how it does, how it all plays out. But I think if there's going to be a choice, it's going to be Barbie that's probably going to make it. All right, let's get to our last segment of the night, and that is, did I just fix the sum of all fears? That is right, everybody. I am attempting to fix, with Dead Reckoning coming out, I thought it'd be fun to talk spy movies. Plus, Jack Ryan came out last week, and I'm all caught up, so I'm interested. I want to jump in. I always like the Jack Ryan movies. So getting into it and kind of discussing it a little bit, little by little, just how all these different movies, like I was talking to my wife about it, a couple other people, because I really like the show they're putting out. But I was always a big fan of the early movies they put out. Hunt for Red October with Alec Baldwin played Jack Ryan, and then, of course, Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games with Harrison Ford. And then some of All Fears came out in early 2000s, and I was super excited for it because it's like, we're getting a new Jack Ryan movie. Now, some of All Fears is a little different in the book. He's either the director of the CIA or he's deputy director or something at that point. This is before he's president. Jack Ryan also in the books becomes president. But the Sum of All Fears was sort of loosely, based on the book. It was kind of changed up a bit to make Jack younger. I think they were going more for of course, this is post 9/11, so we're getting a lot of those sort of feelings put into the movie, which a lot of movies were doing at that point. They were trying to visit something revisit this franchise that I think they didn't understand what made it work or what brought people out. And I really think that one of the biggest fixes that we could have gotten from this movie is it should have been told with Harrison Ford. He was still the right age for it. It still worked. And if you had changed it more into the espionage sort of part of it than the action part, please don't take me to mean that there should be no action in any of these movies. There should. And I understand that this was going to be Ben Affleck's window into having sort of his own Bourne Identity franchise, which he saw Matt Damon have at the time. But that's not who Jack Ryan is. Now, if you want to do something on John Clark or Ding Chavez, yeah, you could. You could definitely pull that out and have a really good one. But that's not who Jack Ryan is. He's an analyst who gets roped into a lot of these things as he's investigating. Now, you should keep the action secondary always and tell a good tale. They just didn't tell a good tale in this. I don't even know why they had. Yes, I don't think his name was William Cabot in the book, but like Marcus or Mark or something like that, Cabot. But the part that Morgan Freeman played, you could have them play it up, but what's the point at this point? Why, if you're going back to the beginning, why not just have Greer? If you're going back to the beginning, have his mentor there from the beginning, or just play it towards the end. So I always thought Sum of All Fears could have been better done had they kept it going. Bring back Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan. play up the espionage portion of it. Get Willem Dafoe back to play John Clark, which he could have. You could have just had so many of the elements from the Tom Clancy novels that really worked out well. What we got in it was just this mess of a convoluted type of movie. Now, I like Lee Schreiber as John Clark, and I would have liked to have visited him more in the role because I thought he was doing a good job playing it. I also thought, what's his name? Morgan Freeman was fine as Cabot, and James Cromwell did a good job as the president and such. It's a great supporting cast, but you're all over the place with it. This movie tried to be too many different movies at once, and it had an actor in it who didn't understand the character of Jack Ryan. Now, I'm not trying to put down Ben Affleck. I think he's one of the greatest directors working today. I like him as an actor. I like him as an actor when he's directing himself, or he has a friend directing him. When it's somebody he really trusts, he lets go, and you can get lost in the role. Or when it's him doing it, he knows what he wants, so he gets lost in the role. But when he doesn't understand a character, or he questions the material he's doing, and this is a lot of his older stuff, Armageddon was the same way. It almost seems like he is making fun of it in some way and how he's acting this out. And he just didn't have the gravitas that you need for a Jack Ryan type of movie. John Krasinski has it in spades, does a great job with it. Another younger version of Jack Ryan. And I really loved that, when they told this story, they added a lot of elements. They weren't afraid to go with the nuclear bomb being set off in the U.S. soil, the turmoil between Russia. But the problem with the villains is, yes, we know Russia isn't the villain, but we're not treating them like villains. You shoehorned in these Nazis who just didn't really work. You didn't set it up enough. There's not enough story or backstory to element to why this faction is doing what it's doing. When they retold the story on the TV show, they did a great job setting it up. And they weren't even Nazis. Like, they were just Russians who were getting jaded by how the Russian government was moving forward in peace relations. So that would have been so much better. And you could have had still Russia as a bad guy, but also like not, because you have the good guy president who's taken over. There's so many elements of it, but you didn't commit to it's same with like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull we talked about last week. You didn't commit to the bad guys being bad. You just shoehorned in another bad facade and made us try and like own it. And I just don't like that. It just didn't work for me. So you need to make the bad guys appear bad. You need to, make America understand the Russians are bad, like Cold War style. Even play it up or go back. Like, if you're going to tell this tale, now don't make it in 2002. Have Jack Ryan in the 1980s. Okay, now we accept why these guys are really bad in our eyes. But he thinks not. He thinks this is okay, especially when they were written in that, era. So it's the wrong actor. Didn't have enough gravitas for the Jack Ryan role. Everybody else was really good to it, but it just the beats needed to be better. And I think if you had a better actor pushing things along and going out the way he did, it'd be, and you had the familiarity of like, okay, Clark and Ryan know each other, especially if you get the actors back that we love seeing. Like, you can switch them out, but like if you get Harrison Ford and Willem Dafoe back, that'd be great when they see each other. And it's like they're still bickering, they're still fighting, but they still respect each other. Things like that. It should have been a sequel. It shouldn't have been a prequel of sorts in the wrong time frame. It was more of a reboot. I just don't think it worked. But hopefully you think that my fixes sort of worked for it. I just think, again, different actor in the role. I think it should have been Harrison Ford, but if not, set it in the 80s. Tell a better tale where but again, I think that tale still would have worked with a better actor in the roles of playing Jack Ryan. And make the villains the actual villains. Don't be afraid to hold back and say you're the villains. And then in the end, they would have been wrong anyway, and it would have worked out. So that's just my fix for it. Please let me know what you guys think. Sound off in the comments. Or, if you're watching on the clip, please sound off there. Head over to the Discord. Let's talk about it. You can head over to the Patreon as well. Talk about it there. We have lots of fun stuff going on and more. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Mick Manhattan. This is the Scene Snobs podcast. I want to thank my guest, Phil Better, for coming on and joining me and talking movies with me and then the box office specifically. I'd love to know what you guys think. Sound off, let me know. Please, if you guys are watching this, please give us a like, give us a subscribe. Really helps us go a long way. But wherever you're listening to this, please give us a follow, maybe a rate and review. It means a lot to us. It helps us go, very far with it. Helps us put the name out there of the show. And we love your input. So sound off. Let me know what you guys think. Again, I'm Mick from the Scene Snobs. I want to say thank you again for watching, for listening, for being a part of it, being a part of the Snobs Nation. You guys are all amazing. Be kind to each other. Be nice. Be sweet. And I'll talk to you guys later. Love you. Take care.